At Colin Vance's birthday celebration, my granddaughter Molly Vance seized my arm with a look of alarm. "Grandpa, we need to leave this place right now." In that instant, I was taken aback. "What's wrong?" I asked her. "Please, just go," she pleaded insistently. I chose to believe her, and that decision spared me from something dreadful that Colin was about to do. You would never guess what he had set in motion. "My dad, I need you to hear me out this time, and don't assume the worst." Colin barreled through my front entrance while I was still speaking, without so much as a knock. His self-assurance seemed practiced, as if he'd rehearsed this conversation in his vehicle before coming inside. I took off my glasses deliberately, closed the evening paper, and placed it aside. The leather seat groaned as I pushed myself upright. "Good evening to you as well, Colin." There was the weight of 38 years' experience with overzealous builders who claimed they could do the unachievable. What could be so important that it couldn't wait until we'd exchanged greetings? He paced back and forth near my bookshelf, abruptly turning, his arms flailing with excitement. "This is it, Dad," he exclaimed. "The break I've been holding out for. A property investment group promising secure profits." I got up and headed toward my filing cabinet with a careful stride. Colin's gaze anxiously tracked me as I pulled out a manila envelope labeled Colin Vance Investments 2019 to 2025. "Guaranteed, you say?" I laid all the paperwork out on my coffee table. 12% returns, perhaps 16%. "Dad, this isn't the same. Just like the Tampa condos were supposed to be different." I presented a payment slip. $67,000 lost in 2 months when the so-called guaranteed rental income was replaced with a notice of repossession. Colin's jaw clenched tightly, and all his self-assurance seemed to evaporate as he realized what I held. Account records, agreements, voided checks, each one documenting my outstanding blunders. "You never believe in me?" His voice grew louder, bouncing off the wooden floorboards. "Every you can easily diversify my portfolio across various markets and assets, accessing stocks, ETFs, and bonds from major exchanges without needing a minimum deposit to begin. I started exploring investment options and managed my finances as diligently as I managed important personal information. Every time I attempted to create something, you undermined it with your pessimism." I flipped through another folder. The order for the cryptocurrency mining rigs never arrived. I lost $44,000 to an internet con artist I found online. That situation was different. I kept sorting through paperwork. The mobile food business I started with a convicted criminal as my associate. $26,500 in initial expenses lasted precisely 82 days. Colin's cheeks turned crimson as he snatched his jacket from its spot on my sofa. His movements were abrupt and filled with frustration. "I'm impossible to deal with," he said. He insisted that this organization owns legitimate properties, has genuine investors, and generates real profits. I challenged him to prove it to me with documentation. I didn't have the paperwork with me, just as you didn't have my funds. An uncomfortable silence yawned between us like a canyon. Outside, the dimming light spread across my yard. Somewhere down Birch Avenue, a neighbor's dog began barking. Colin's shoulders drooped for a moment, but he soon straightened up again. "All right. When this venture earns millions without your help, don't expect me to come running when you want your share," he said. I strode toward the entrance, my footfalls loud against the oak planks beneath me. The front door was slammed so violently that my windows shook in their frames. Peering through the glass, I saw him struggle to get his keys in the ignition. All the certainty I held just moments before vanished completely. I started the car with a jarring rev that sounded excessive. I threw the car in reverse so quickly that gravel sprayed as my tires spun. The red of his taillights burned with resentment in the fading evening light as he rounded the corner and vanished. I continued to stand at the window, staring out onto the deserted street long after the hum of his engine had faded. The red gleam from his taillights faded as his vehicle turned onto Birch Avenue. Pulling away from the glass, I caught a glimpse of my own faint image reflected in the dusk. With the shouting and door slamming lingering in the air, the house now seemed empty, resonant with echoes. I wandered toward the kitchen, instinctively following the time-worn route over the squeaky boards. Preparing coffee became my comfort, beginning with the familiar act of grinding fresh beans, tracking the flow of water, the persistent drip punctuating the quiet of the night. After 38 years of marriage, I understood that certain discussions warranted a cup of coffee afterward, even if I was the only one present. As steam curled from my mug, I brought it with me into my study. With a faint metallic sound, I slid open the filing cabinet drawer. Chronologically arranged manila folders appeared, representing every lesson my son, Colin Vance, refused to heed. Tampa came first. On paper, the real estate brochure appeared above board. High-gloss advertising displayed immaculate condos with views of Tampa Bay. Colin had been 34 at the time, still hopeful he could make fast money. The developer disappeared with the investors' funds, never starting the project. $67,000 vanished, and I spread out the cryptocurrency files over my work table. The mining rigs amounted to nothing more than images and internet ads. My son had once shown me YouTube clips of supposed mining operations, certain he'd stumbled onto a new path to prosperity. The fraudulent website appeared credible at first, but then it vanished without warning, taking $44,000 out of reach. The food truck business partnership was the next development. My son's proposal for a company had actually impressed me at first. He planned to use locally sourced ingredients, and his chosen downtown spot was conveniently located near the courthouse. However, I later uncovered that his business associate had a criminal background. The man had committed embezzlement and stolen from a former employer, although Colin brushed off my worries as unwarranted suspicion. 2 months after that, the partner vanished with both the equipment and the leftover seed money. My coffee sat untouched in my mug as I sifted through bank records that revealed repeated infusions of cash to bail him out at Riverbend Casino, Sun Prairie Resort, and the occasional trip out to Reno with Natalie Vance. At first, the sums were small, 400 here, 900 there. These appeals became more frequent following his wedding, just until my next commission check became his go-to request. Every file painted the same picture. My son's persistent hopefulness often crashed into unyielding reality. Yet tonight seemed out of the ordinary. His frustration was more intense, and there was a noticeable sense of urgency. The way he avoided my gaze while talking about his syndicate, along with the ambiguous explanations regarding paperwork, were warning signs I had come to recognize over the years of screening subcontractors. My thoughts drifted to the impact Natalie Vance had. Before marrying her, Colin Vance's schemes had been smaller and less frequent. She fueled his lofty ambitions, propelling him into even greater risks. Her costly preferences came with costly demands. I gazed at the family portrait on my desk, a snapshot of better days. Colin, when he was 18, receiving his high school diploma. Back then, pride was visible in his expression. Genuine achievement forged by hard work. When did that disappear? At what point did I come to believe that accomplishment should come effortlessly? My father had established our construction company with rough hands, putting in 16-hour shifts. My own lessons came through hauling tools, mixing concrete, and learning about materials at the most fundamental level. Colin aimed for executive glory without any experience in the trenches. The glow from my desk lamp fell gently over the financial devastation that spanned 5 years. About $185,000 had vanished into reckless enterprises, frauds, and poor decisions. With each incident, I wished it would finally serve as his wake-up call. Every time, he convinced me that the next venture might turn out differently, but I knew my attempts to enable him were doing no good. Each time I stepped in, I only postponed his need to face reality. With deliberate care, I organized the documents, putting every folder back where it belonged. I closed the filing cabinet, hearing the click that marked the end of it. Through my window, the streetlights blinked on by themselves, casting a glow over the deserted walkways. The next day would bring its own obstacles, but the choice I made tonight felt justified. Sometimes, the most compassionate act was refusing to give in. I switched off the light at my desk and made my way upstairs, letting the study fade into shadow. When morning arrived, sunlight poured through the kitchen glass as I slipped my shopping list into my wallet. The argument I'd had with Colin now seemed as distant as a storm on the horizon, unpleasant but necessary, and now over. My thoughts felt clearer after I had my coffee. A shower had washed away the stress of the previous day. Today promised comfort in its familiar rituals. I collected my reusable grocery sacks from the hook in the pantry, made sure my car keys were on me, and went to open the front door. The morning breeze was filled with the fragrance of Dorothy Fleming's lilacs that blossomed next door. The spring day was absolutely ideal for running errands. My steps slowed suddenly when I reached the middle of the brick path. My Honda didn't look quite right. The car sagged more than usual, its frame tilted to one side as if it had suffered a blow. Every single tire on the car was utterly deflated, the chassis nearly scraping the rims. I felt a surge of dread as I made my way to the silver sedan. This wasn't the slow loss of air from deterioration or bad weather. All 4 tires had matching punctures near the sidewall, small, deliberate holes that could only have been made on purpose. I bent down by the passenger side front tire and traced along the rubber with my finger, where a metallic object jutted from the hole. It was a roofing nail, identical to the kind I stored in my own workshop for fixing things in a pinch. After circling the car, I discovered that the same thing had happened to each wheel. 4 nails, 4 flat tires, all unmistakable signs of deliberate vandalism. The act must have taken place sometime between midnight and the early morning hours. The sequence of events became clear to me. The heated dispute from last night, Colin's furious outburst, his warning that I shouldn't come begging when his plan paid off, and now this incident. Someone with expertise had done this sabotage discreetly during the night. I reached for my phone and called Colin's number. He picked up on the 3rd ring, his voice groggy and still heavy with sleep. "Dad, is something the matter? It's only 10 o'clock. Colin, I discovered that all my tires were slashed this morning. Each one had been pierced." There was a silence. When Colin responded, he sounded sincerely worried. "Dad, that's awful. It's probably just some teenagers from around here. You know how they are on spring break. Every tire, Colin. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The nails were positioned perfectly to cause the greatest harm. Are you—" I hesitated. "Are you trying to say I had something to do with it?" The pain in his reply felt real, though I had caught Colin being dishonest before. About his betting losses, his poor investments, and his repeated assurances that he would improve. "I was just making sure whether you noticed anything out of place when you headed out last night. Any unfamiliar vehicles or people around." I went directly home. "Listen, I realize we exchanged harsh words the day before, but I could never do that. This is destruction of property. I thought I ought to notify the authorities, but should I really? What evidence did I actually possess aside from coincidence and mistrust?" Colin's insistence seemed believable, and blaming him might irreparably shatter what little was left of our bond. "I'll sort this out with my insurance," I told him at last. "Thanks for looking out." "Hold on," he said. "I regret how things went yesterday, all of it. We were both out of line. We can talk about it later, Colin. I have to call AAA now." The emergency assistance dispatcher said it would be 45 minutes before a tow truck could arrive. I hung up and gazed at my damaged car, suddenly feeling older than my 68 years. Could I have been mistaken about Colin? The tone during the call had sounded truly astonished and understanding. Perhaps some local troublemakers had picked my car at random. It could have simply been bad luck, but after 38 years in construction, I had become adept at spotting trends, and this particular situation led me to a conclusion I wished I could ignore. I picked up my grocery bags and made my way back home. The shopping trip would have to be postponed. When the mechanic eventually showed up, his assessment confirmed what I had already suspected. All 4 tires had been deliberately slashed by a professional, resulting in $720 in repairs. I sat at home, eating a turkey sandwich, paging through yesterday's newspaper. I did my best to concentrate on the sports pages, hoping to pull my mind away from the unease that kept growing inside me. The phone rang just as I reached out to grab my coffee cup. My son's name, Colin Vance, flashed on the caller ID. "Hi," I said. "How's my day so far?" The cheerfulness in Colin's voice felt a bit strained, like sunlight pushing through heavy rain clouds. The quickness of it felt unnatural. He didn't say a word about our morning discussion. The conversation about the tires proceeded without any mention of the previous day's dispute. "It's been eventful," I answered cautiously. "I spent my morning at Morrison's Tire Center," I added. "Oh, that's right, the thing with the vandalism." "That's really terrible. But I'm actually calling with some happy news. Tomorrow is my birthday and Natalie's put together something special." I placed my sandwich on the table, Colin's 39th birthday. With all the commotion lately, I had completely let it slip my mind. "Nothing extravagant," he went on. "Just a dinner with the family at 6:30. Molly will be there, along with several close friends. It would really mean a lot if you could make it, Dad," I said to Glenn. The invitation surprised me. Given yesterday's heated confrontation and the tire problem this morning, I assumed we'd remain silent for a while rather than discuss a joyful celebration. That's very kind of you to include me, I replied, feeling cautious. Come on, Dad. We may have our differences when it comes to money, but we're still family. Molly, in particular, had asked for me to be there if my dad would attend. She was really looking forward to seeing him. Thinking about my granddaughter, Molly Vance, brought out a protective feeling within me. She had always been the source of light during our family events, untouched by the financial issues her parents faced. If she wished for my presence, how could I say no? What should I bring along? I wondered aloud. Just yourself. Natalie Vance is taking care of everything. All the food, the decor, everything's covered. She's truly pulled out all the stops this time. That made sense of the higher costs. Natalie's version of all out usually resulted in expenses that would test Colin's already unstable budget. But for once, that wasn't something I needed to worry about. Certainly, I'll be there, 6:30 on the dot. Wonderful. And Glenn Randall, I appreciate you not making a fuss about what happened yesterday. Work had me overwhelmed, and I took out my frustration on you when it wasn't fair. The apology seemed sincere, with a hint of the vulnerability I used to notice in Colin as a kid. Perhaps I had misunderstood the tire issue. Maybe his concern was genuine, his attempt to mend things between us real. Let bygones be bygones, I told myself. I told myself I'd see them the next day. When I ended the call, I found myself seated at my kitchen table, experiencing a guarded sense of hope. Family gatherings had become uncommon since Colin Vance married Natalie Vance. Because Natalie's busy schedule often pushed family moments aside, except for special occasions and mandatory events, I rarely spent time with her. Yet a birthday party seemed like the perfect reason to reconnect, to try to close the distance that had formed. My granddaughter would be present, likely eager to tell me about her recent experiences at college. Colin might have a brighter outlook, being surrounded by family and friends. As I finished my sandwich, I mulled over possible presents. I didn't want to get anything too lavish, especially considering our discussion the day before. I aimed for something meaningful yet sensible, perhaps a quality set of tools for his workshop hobbies, or a practical book about business leadership I'd be willing to read. The calm afternoon unfolded before me. Looking forward to the celebration gave me something pleasant to focus on, replacing thoughts about flat tires and family strain. Maybe this was Colin's version of offering a peace gesture, a way to mend the friction we'd felt lately. The moment might raise eyebrows, but birthdays have a tendency to help families see past their disputes. After tidying up my lunch things, I went into the living room and started searching the internet for suitable presents. For the first time in 48 hours, real optimism bubbled up regarding where things stood with Colin. On the following day, once the taxi rolled away from Colin's house, I made my way down the paved path, balancing the neatly wrapped present under my arm. The air that evening was filled with the scent of grilled food and the sound of laughter drifting from the backyard. Peering in through the front windows, I could make out figures shuffling by. Far more attendees than I'd anticipated for what was supposed to be a small family gathering. Before I had a chance to ring the bell, Colin opened the door, his face shining with what looked like genuine excitement as he greeted me. "Dad, you made it. Come on inside." The house was almost unrecognizable. Where modest decor once filled the rooms, now every inch sparkled with costly accents. Crystal stemware shimmered in the glow of a chandelier that was definitely new to me. A lavish array of food, visible past the kitchen door, made it look as though they had hired caterers. "Happy birthday, Colin," I said as I presented him with a present, a high-quality set of tools I'd picked out with great thought. It was hard to comprehend that it had been 38 years. "Thanks, Dad. This really means a lot to me." Colin's cheerful expression slipped for just an instant, as if something uncertain crossed his features. "Natalie, Dad's here," he called out. She stepped out from the kitchen in a sophisticated dress that likely cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. "It's so wonderful to see you," Natalie said warmly. "Let me introduce you around." Conversations buzzed throughout the living room, where youthful professionals I didn't know chatted with glasses of wine about their jobs and finances. The assortment of drinks caught my eye, an impressive collection of high-end labels that I knew Colin Vance could never afford on just his commission earnings. Amid the commotion, I heard Molly Vance's voice carry across the room. She hurried toward me, enveloping me in an embrace that felt more heartfelt than any other welcome I'd experienced that night. "I'm so happy you made it." I wouldn't have missed your father, Colin's 39th birthday, darling. How is college going for you? Finals are starting next week, but I'm getting by. Would you like me to grab you a drink? Colin made sure to stock your preferred beer. Colin appeared at my side, holding an imported beer I recognized from upscale dining spots in Salem the previous year. Does this one look familiar, Dad? You picked it out at that steakhouse in Salem last year. Accepting the beer, I was moved that he recalled such a minor thing. Perhaps Colin's invitation had truly come from the heart. It was possible the tire slashing had just been random mischief, and maybe I'd wrongly doubted my own son. The night unfolded in an unexpectedly friendly way. Colin's group welcomed me into their conversation, showing what seemed to be sincere curiosity about the construction industry. Natalie made sure my drink was never empty, reappearing with a new refill and a cheerful grin each time my glass ran dry. "This is some feast," I remarked as we ate, motioning toward the selection of catered food in front of us. "Another glass of wine, Glenn." Natalie appeared, holding a bottle of Cabernet that probably cost more than I usually spend on groceries for the week. "This goes perfectly with the steak." I agreed with a nod, noticing the pleasant warmth from the wine beginning to relax me. The contradictions of the night seemed to fade, their significance diminished, eclipsed by the pure joy of celebrating together with my loved ones. My granddaughter was seated next to me, discussing her experiences in psychology courses, and, just by being there, reminded me of what was truly important. I watched as my son got to his feet to offer a toast, lifting his glass in an exuberant, exaggerated fashion. He toasted to family, new beginnings, and all that lay ahead. We all took a sip of our drinks. The wine really stood out, velvety, full-bodied, and likely aged longer than several of Colin's acquaintances had been around. As the night continued, I felt myself truly letting go for the first time in what felt like ages. Still, a lingering sense of unease hovered at the back of my mind. My son kept glancing at the time on his watch. Natalie Vance's smile appeared gentle, but I could tell it never reached her eyes. Whenever my gaze drifted around the gathering, I noticed the two of them exchanging loaded glances when they assumed I wasn't looking. As we entered the third hour of the celebration, without any sign of it coming to an end, I made myself comfortable in Colin's recently purchased leather chair, yet another lavish item I hadn't noticed on previous visits. As I watched the lively discussions taking place around me, the wine left me feeling pleasantly at ease, and my earlier doubts about sabotaged tires and unexplained bills faded into the background. Feeling removed and insignificant, my son, Colin Vance, appeared at my side, holding another drink. "Do you want to head upstairs so I can show you the upgrades?" he asked. "We've really done incredible things to the primary bedroom," I said. I looked around, noticing the party in full swing. "Shouldn't you be spending time with your friends? Everyone here seems to be enjoying themselves. Seriously, I want you to see what we've managed to do." His determination seemed unusual, and before I could answer, my daughter-in-law appeared on my other side. "Oh yes, Glenn, you really have to check out the new bathroom features. We didn't worry about cost. There it was again. Spare no expense. Coming from those who claimed they couldn't manage basic expenses without my help. Just as I began to get up from my chair, my granddaughter Molly appeared at my side, her complexion pale and her eyes wide with an emotion I couldn't instantly recognize. Was it fear or panic? My dad? She whispered to me, clutching my arm with startling firmness. "You need to leave right away." I blinked, thinking I hadn't heard her correctly. "What? Please." Her words carried a sense of urgency that sliced through my wine-fueled fog. "Just go." "Trust me, something isn't right." Colin moved in closer, his smile frozen in place. "Molly, what are you even saying?" Glenn was just about to check out the upstairs. No, he wasn't. Molly's hold on my arm became even firmer. "Glenn, please, you really need to head home." The urgency in my granddaughter Molly's voice snapped me out of my stupor immediately. In 18 years, I had never seen Molly look truly scared, certainly confused, or at times annoyed with her parents, but never displaying this level of pure fear. I thought to myself that I should pay attention to my granddaughter, and began to get up. It's getting late anyway. "Glenn, don't be ridiculous," I heard. Colin's upbeat demeanor slipped for a moment. The celebration was just getting started. We hadn't even sliced the cake. "Where are you off to, Dad?" Natalie asked, her tone pointed even as she kept a polite smile. I couldn't slip away before we had celebrated the right way. There was something about their synchronized insistence that set off an internal warning, honed by my 38 years in business. Whenever two people put this much effort into making me stay, it was usually a sign I should be somewhere else. "I'm just feeling a little worn out," I replied, rising from my seat while they lingered close by. "I guess age is having its say." "Just one more glass," my son urged. He said he'd been saving a bottle for a special occasion. "We'll do that another time, Colin," I replied. I started for the entrance, but Colin blocked my way. "Dad, come on. My granddaughter is just overreacting. College takes a toll, and you know how students get." She let out a noise that sounded a lot like a stifled sob. As I glanced her way, I could see tears welling up in her eyes. I could see the concern in her gaze, and that made up my mind. "I appreciate the wonderful evening," I replied resolutely, moving past Colin to reach the coat closet. "I'll give you a call in the morning." "But Glenn, in the morning, Colin." I took my coat and made my way toward the exit. As I left, I caught the sound of agitated whispers between Colin and Natalie behind me, their voices too faint to distinguish, but clearly anxious, more than enough to convince me that Molly's warning was warranted. The crisp night breeze struck my cheeks as I stepped outside, clearing the remnants of wine from my mind. I pulled out my phone to order a cab, then turned back to glance at the house. Through the pain, I noticed my granddaughter observing me, her expression a blend of anxiety and relief. She placed her palms softly against the window, as if bidding me farewell. No matter what threat she sensed that day, I had complete faith in her intuition. The streetlights cast restless shadows over the back seat as we drove. My hands were unsteady, though I couldn't tell if it was from the drinks I'd had that night or the rush of adrenaline after making my escape. When the driver caught my eye in the rear view, he probably wondered if he'd picked up someone running from trouble. I punched in my granddaughter's number, hoping she'd have a minute to talk alone. She picked up right away on the first ring. "My granddaughter, are you all right? Are you somewhere safe?" she asked, her worried tone confirming my deepest suspicions. It became clear that whatever I'd gotten away from tonight was both genuine and a real threat. "I'm in a taxi heading home." "Molly, what was going on back there? Why did you tell me to leave?" I asked. There was a long silence. Faint party noises filtered through before I heard a door close. "I heard my parents talking yesterday," she replied, her voice lowering until it was nearly inaudible. "They were plotting something to do with me and the celebration happening tonight. What sort of scheme was it? Their intent was to get me intoxicated and have me sign important business papers. It concerned transferring my company into my dad, Glenn Randall's name. Hearing those words was like being struck in the gut. My own son, Colin Vance, scheming to take away everything I had created. Nearly 38 years of grueling labor. Was I absolutely sure about this, Molly Vance? My father, Glenn Randall? There were attorneys waiting upstairs in the guest room. My mother, Natalie Vance, kept glancing at her watch, carefully ensuring I had enough wine. My father, Glenn Randall, wouldn't stop encouraging me to go upstairs for a look at the new renovations. Suddenly, it all made horrible sense. The lavish party, the unending wine, Colin's jittery behavior, Natalie's sly grins. They had carefully set an intricate snare, and I had fallen straight into it. How much did I actually hear? Enough to realize their plan was set in motion right after my 39th birthday. The argument Wednesday night started when my mother accused me of being selfish, holding on to all that money when my father, Glenn Randall, needed it for his investments. I felt my grip harden around the phone. They called me selfish. My mother, as usual, was absolutely sure her plan would succeed. She claimed that after I had enough to drink, I'd just sign whatever papers they handed me. She said something about how older folks tend to get confused after a few drinks. The offhanded cruelty in her words hurt me almost as much as the sense of betrayal. In their eyes, I was nothing more than a target to manipulate with trickery and use for their own advantage. "Molly, please pay close attention to me now. I need you to give me your word about something important." "What is it? Don't mention anything about this talk to your parents. They didn't get upset with you for asking me to leave, did they?" "All right, I won't say anything. My father questioned me about why I did it and asked if I was aware of what would happen tonight. I denied it and added that I told you to leave because it gets extremely risky in our neighborhood once it gets late. Afterward, I headed to my bedroom. They believe I'm unaware of what they're planning. I promise myself I'll handle what's happening, but I need to stay cautious. Can I do that? Yes, though what if they have another plan? My mother was absolutely convinced her idea would succeed. You saved everything I worked on tonight, Molly. I'm proud of the person you're turning into. The taxi made a turn onto Birch Avenue, and my house came into view in the distance. Dorothy Fleming was on her front porch, her nightly rituals completely undisturbed by the trouble playing out nearby. I have to leave now, sweetheart. Thank you for being the one family member I can confide in without hesitation. I love you. I love you as well. Don't forget, if you ever need anything, give me a call. As I hung up, a single thought kept repeating in my mind. There was no way I was going to let this betrayal go unpunished. I watched as the taxi's taillights faded from view around the bend. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my house keys, standing at the edge of my driveway. Home, with all its familiar heft, felt altered in that moment. It was more than a place of comfort. Now it felt like my only stronghold in the middle of an attack. "Evening, Glenn Randall. You're coming in pretty late tonight," Dorothy Fleming called out, her words bridging the narrow distance between our yards. Dorothy was perched on her porch in the same old wicker chair, bundled in a lightweight shawl to ward off the cool spring air, just as she always had since I'd first met her. "Good evening, Dorothy." "I was just overseeing my son," I replied. "I noticed you had your car sorted out. Those new tires suit it," she remarked. I hesitated, my hand midway to the door. "What made you aware of the tire issue?" I asked. She didn't respond immediately, quietly rocking in her chair for a moment longer. Eventually she rose and walked over to the porch railing, stopping close enough so our conversation could carry easily without raising our voices. "Well, I was sitting out here Friday evening. You know how much I enjoy the nighttime breeze. I spotted something that unsettled me, but I hesitated to bring it up. A shiver went through me, unrelated to the coolness in the air. What exactly did you witness, Dorothy? I believe it's time you learned the truth about your tires, Glenn." My steps took me closer to her boundary, my heartbeat quickening. "Go ahead, tell me." "I saw Colin Vance leaving your house that night at around 10 o'clock. He walked a circuit around your car while holding an item in his hand. It looked as though he was examining each of your tires. After that, he crouched by each tire, did something I couldn't quite see, and then rose, glancing around as if to make sure no one saw him. The realization hit me with crushing force. This wasn't some random act of vandalism or the antics of local kids. My very own son, systematically damaging my belongings with precise intent, an act of revenge. Are you absolutely sure it was Colin Vance? Glenn, I've known Colin since childhood. It was most certainly him. This happened immediately after I overheard loud voices coming from your place. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but on calm nights, sound travels easily. She had witnessed the entire incident, our heated exchange, his departure, and how he retaliated almost immediately. The timing made it clear to me that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, but a calculated act far more serious than a desperate need for money. He didn't spot me here, hidden in the darkness, I went on. I avoid turning on my porch light in the evenings, so I can see the night sky better. I'm grateful I shared this with you, Dorothy Fleming. I debated whether to mention it at all. Matters within a family are sensitive, and I try not to meddle. Still, after I noticed you buying those expensive brand new tires, I felt you deserved the truth. First, there was the legal snare my granddaughter, Molly Vance, uncovered, and now, the proof about the tires, vandalism, coming from Dorothy Fleming. My son, Colin Vance, had set in motion a deliberate series of attacks against me. After the property was damaged, he executed a calculated plan to take control of my business. This was no longer an act of desperation. It had escalated into a full-blown battle. I told her, "Let's keep this just between us for now," trying to project calm, even though fury was churning inside of me. "Naturally, but that son of yours must learn to respect all the effort you've put into this," she responded. "You didn't sacrifice so much just for someone, especially family, to destroy it out of resentment." Dorothy Fleming's comments were grounded in 38 years of watching over our block. She had witnessed my son's childhood and noticed his slow shift from a promising boy to a source of regret. Her remarks carried genuine authority rather than being the view of an outsider. "I appreciate you being such a supportive neighbor, Dorothy," I said. "I should head in. It's been a pretty exhausting day." "Look after yourself, and don't forget, if you ever need someone to confirm what I witnessed, I'm here," she reassured me. I'm not ashamed to speak honestly. I gave a nod, feeling genuinely moved by her steadfastness. and then made my way to my own front door. As I walked away, I could hear her settle back into her rocking chair, resuming her usual watch over our peaceful block. Once I was inside my home, I switched on all the lights and stood in my living room, surrounded by 38 years of dedicated labor and cautious saving, all the things my son had attempted to snatch away. That night, using attorneys and sly tactics, he had already begun dismantling everything with acts of destruction and profound betrayal. The meticulous pattern of his onslaught, first with financial schemes, then acts of property sabotage, and finally intricate legal traps, revealed a deliberate plan rather than mere reckless behavior. Colin had launched a full-blown conflict against me. It was time to act with the gravity this required. Morning dawned dull and cloudy, mirroring the steely resolve that had rooted itself in me overnight. My rest came only in brief patches, interrupted by mental tallies of Colin's betrayals and careful reviews of his weaknesses. Now, at 7:45 a.m., I found myself at my kitchen table, sipping freshly brewed coffee with a legal pad in front of me, prepared to forge 38 years of business knowledge into a sharp tool. The shock to my emotions had hardened into something far more powerful, a strategic focus. Colin Vance thought he could challenge me, a man who had carved out an empire from the ground up. It was time to show him exactly who had taught him every skill he possessed in the business world. I headed to my study and retrieved the filing cabinet that contained my son's entire investment record. Each manila folder stood as proof of financial recklessness, a consistent pattern of questionable choices that I could finally use to my advantage. The Tampa condo scam, the cryptocurrency fiasco, that food truck venture with a known criminal, all of it was meticulously recorded in contracts, bank records, and correspondence. But dredging up past blunders wasn't really my aim here. My objective now was to turn this information into a weapon. Colin had made 3 major missteps in his offensive against me. First, he didn't take into account the range of my business relationships. Second, he failed to realize that I had written records of every unsuccessful enterprise he had ever tried. Third, he believed that being family would shield him from facing consequences. He was completely mistaken on all 3 points. I arranged the investment paperwork in order across my desk. $67,000 disappeared in Tampa when the real estate developer vanished. $44,000 vanished on crypto mining hardware that was never delivered. $26,500 was put into a food truck operation that went under when Colin Vance's partner, a man with a record for embezzlement, ran off with what was left. Each of these fiascos involved other backers, people who trusted Colin because of his connection to my reputation. Eric Talbot ended up losing $21,500 in the Tampa project. Kenneth Lynn had put in $28,800 for the crypto investment. Allison O'Brien had staked $16,500 on the food truck plan. All of them lost their money because they placed their faith in my son, Colin Vance. What mattered even more was that each of them was part of Cedar Falls' close-knit business circle. Eric Talbot was a member of the Chamber of Commerce. Kenneth Lynn chaired the Regional Investment Organization. Allison O'Brien held a position in financial services and considered transparency her highest priority. These were ideal networks for distributing information. I pulled up my directory of contacts and began organizing their phone numbers and addresses. Delivering anonymous tips demanded precision, a professional appearance, supporting documentation, and convincing deniability. Years spent in the construction business had taught me that ruining someone's reputation required a methodical approach, not heated reactions. The first phase would be to reveal my son's history of mishandling finances to those he had wronged in the past. As soon as these individuals began sharing their experiences, investors would rapidly realize they had been consistently misled. The second step would be aimed at my daughter-in-law's work affiliations. Her lavish preferences hinted at other sources of income, besides Colin's faltering sales job. Someone that surely harbored business weaknesses I could take advantage of. The third stage would introduce legal and financial repercussions to limit their capacity to carry out future scams against anyone. What made this plan so effective was its ability to be sustained over time. I didn't need to pretend anymore. There was no longer any necessity to maintain a facade or mislead anyone. The documentation would make everything clear, allowing Colin Vance's victims to reach their own judgments regarding his integrity and dealings. I powered up my computer and set up a new email account, ensuring complete anonymity for this purpose. Express document couriers could handle the delivery of all documents. Careful scheduling would be essential. Saturday afternoon distribution would guarantee processing over the weekend, and direct repercussions by Tuesday morning. The telephone rang suddenly, interrupting my concentration. Colin's name showed up on the caller ID screen. I chose not to answer. Any rationale or justification he hoped to give could be addressed later. For the moment, I needed to focus on my immediate responsibilities. When 1 o'clock rolled around on Saturday afternoon, my home office had taken on the appearance of a strategic command center. I had investment paperwork neatly spread out by date on my desk, organized according to each investor and the total sum lost. Sitting on a nearby table were 3 substantial manila envelopes prepared for the couriers, each one filled with ample proof to utterly ruin whatever remained of my son's reputation in the world of finance. The initial parcel was addressed to Eric Talbot, who had lost $21,500 in Colin Vance's Tampa condo venture. Inside the package were photocopies of the original investment agreement, bank wire documentation, and email exchanges demonstrating my son's knowledge that the developer was going through bankruptcy even as he continued to solicit funds from investors. The second envelope held records of Kenneth Lynn's cryptocurrency calamity, $28,800 put into mining hardware that turned out to be nothing more than digital advertisements. I included the email thread where Colin conceded that the vendor seemed dubious, but argued that the potential returns were impossible to ignore. Allison O'Brien's parcel described the failed food truck project, $16,500 invested in a joint business with a known embezzler. The agreement my son had entered into had explicit background check requirements, which he had purposely overlooked. Within each envelope was a brief cover letter, along with information for your review detailing Colin Vance's business conduct. I ask that you examine the enclosed records and come to your own judgment. There were no accusations and no appeals to emotion, only evidence, timelines, and financial records that clearly told the story on their own. I contacted express document couriers and arranged for delivery to all 3 locations on the same day. The schedule worked ideally. Saturday afternoon would allow the recipients the weekend to review the documents and coordinate before the start of the week's work. The dispatcher assured me the delivery would remain anonymous. That wouldn't be an issue. Payment in cash would be required upon collection. When it comes to professional couriers, they never inquire about the nature of anonymous parcels. Over the past 38 years in business, I'd discovered that legitimate dealings often depended on careful handling of sensitive information. The courier picked up the packages from my home at 2:45 p.m. That evening, 3 of Cedar Falls' most influential business insiders would be examining hard proof of Colin Vance's ongoing scheme to defraud his investors. Eric Talbot held considerable sway within the Chamber of Commerce. Kenneth Lynn headed the investment committee that assessed the new local ventures. Allison O'Brien's firm, Summit Wealth Advisors, counseled nearly half the business owners in the city. My son Colin had chosen the absolute worst possible people to cross. I have proved to be the worst person to deceive, especially when it comes to my own father. My cell phone buzzed once more. This was the 3rd call Colin Vance had made to reach me since last night. This time, I picked up the phone. Thank heavens, I've been trying to talk to you since last night. I was occupied, Glenn. About what happened yesterday. Why did you take my granddaughter's side and leave? Did she say something to you? I was simply exhausted. It had been an exhausting week. Listen, regarding yesterday, I'd appreciate it if you could visit again. My daughter-in-law, Natalie Vance, put a lot of effort into organizing the party. She felt let down when you weren't able to stay. That effortless fib came naturally to him, as if he had done it countless times before. He skillfully avoided mentioning any legal matters or the need to sign documents. There was no acknowledgement of the predicament I had managed to escape. The gathering was lovely, I responded evenly. Please pass along my thanks to Natalie for being such a gracious host. Certainly. Actually, perhaps we could get lunch sometime next week. I've been thinking about our discussion on Thursday night, and I might have come up with a few fresh investment options that should address your issues. There was more scheming, another round of attempts to sway me. He never managed to change. I'll take a look at my calendar and return your call. Of course, Dad. I love you. Take care, Colin. I ended the call and glanced at the clock. 2:45 p.m. The delivery had only happened 45 minutes before. By 6:30, three highly influential individuals would be studying comprehensive reports detailing my son Colin's business downfalls. Seconds later, the phone rang again. The caller was unidentified. I let it go unanswered. A small part of me wished it was Eric Talbot following up about the packet he'd just received. However, staying behind the scenes was essential for my plan to succeed. Now, I had to let the facts speak for themselves. It was time for the wronged investors to make up their own minds. By Wednesday morning, documented evidence of Colin Vance's pattern of deceiving investors would be the top story in the local professional circles. The opening stage had begun. On Wednesday morning, I received verification that my investor initiative had worked just as I had hoped. The phone rang 6 times before 8 a.m., from business associates asking cautiously crafted questions concerning recent developments in my son's investment background. News was circulating throughout Cedar Falls' business circles, exactly as I had intended. I called Kenneth Lynn on Sunday evening so we could compare information. Kenneth then reached out to Allison O'Brien to confirm what each of us had been told. By Wednesday morning, 3 of the most prominent professionals in town were alerting their networks about Colin Vance's established record of misleading investors. The first phase was a total victory. Now, I could move on to phase 2. I settled into my study, brewed a fresh cup of coffee, and pulled out a newly labeled manila folder titled Natalie Vance Professional Standing. If Colin was the reckless risk-taker, Natalie was the shrewd architect behind the birthday party ploy. She deserved similar consequences. Natalie was a senior client relationship manager at Summit Wealth Advisors, where she managed high-net-worth clients who demanded unwavering trust and a high degree of professional honesty. Her role was sustained solely by a reputation built on principled actions and prudent decisions. Complete exposure. I devoted the morning to quietly gathering information within my professional circles. As a financial consultant who frequently partnered with construction firms, I had genuine reasons to inquire about local companies and their employees. What I discovered was eye-opening. Natalie Vance was often seen at Lakeview Tavern in the afternoons on weekdays, always accompanied by the same sharply dressed, businesslike gentleman. Numerous contacts shared that their extended discussions took place over pricey wine during periods when she was expected to be attending to clients. The man always with Natalie appeared to be an executive visiting from Salem. Evidently married, his wedding band was clear, but unusually focused on my daughter-in-law. Even more compelling was Natalie Vance's pattern of expenditures. In spite of Colin Vance's claims of money troubles, I discovered she was shopping for designer clothes, fine jewelry, and luxurious goods that far exceeded what our finances should have permitted. Either Colin had misrepresented their budget, or Natalie had streams of money I was unaware of. Either scenario worked to my advantage. I put together a formal complaint about professional conduct, addressed to Summit Wealth Advisors Human Resources, meticulously detailing the conflict between Natalie Vance's role as a reputable advisor and her family's coordinated effort to exploit senior clients through legal technicalities. In the complaint, I emphasized that someone entrusted with protecting clients' finances had actively participated in a scheme to steal my business, using fraudulent legal documents and errors caused by alcohol. It was necessary for my daughter-in-law's employer to realize she viewed the assets of elderly clients as fair game for her family's gain. I attached records for the 39th birthday celebration expenses, including catering, drinks, and decor, all pointing to financial means that contradicted the hardship Natalie almost certainly described to her peers and customers. The anonymous package was sent out Wednesday afternoon by express document couriers, accompanied by a note urging HR to review Natalie's recent relationships with clients for any emerging conflicts of interest or unethical financial guidance driven by personal profit. By Thursday morning, Summit Wealth Advisors was launching an internal review of their top relationship managers for breaches of professional conduct and violations of client confidence. My phone started to ring as I closed up the envelope. The caller ID was hidden. I ignored the call but made a mental note of the hour. My son, Colin Vance, was growing frantic, dialing me from various numbers to get through. That was promising. Panic leads to blunders, and blunders open up possibilities. My calculated dismantling of both plotters was advancing exactly as I had designed. Wednesday afternoon brought the noise I'd been waiting to hear. The loud, demanding knock confirmed their agitated state even before I saw them. Both stood on my porch, their faces flushed with a mix of rage and fear. The easy assurance my son Colin once had was gone, replaced now by the look of a trapped animal. Colin wore an expression that only someone facing total collapse could have. Natalie Vance's carefully maintained composure finally cracked, letting her simmering anger show beneath her usual poise. "We need to talk," Colin insisted, brushing past me as he entered my home. "Now." "We know what you've been up to, Glenn Randall," Natalie continued as she trailed her husband into my living room. With deliberate calm, I closed the door behind them and motioned for them to use the couch. "I figured we'd end up having this discussion. Please have a seat." "Don't try to claim you're innocent," Colin shot back, choosing to stand his ground. "It was you who wrecked my business ties using those unsigned letters. Eric Talbot, Kenneth Lynn, and Allison O'Brien each received the same packet of information about investments I made years earlier." Natalie's anger took a more measured, yet still powerful form. "My job was notified of an ethics violation yesterday, and now HR is thoroughly investigating how I handle client accounts. Someone sent in an exhaustive report regarding how our family manages its finances." I settled back in my leather armchair, the very chair where this whole dispute had first started just a week earlier. Those grievances reported nothing but verified details. Investors have a right to be aware of established trends of failure. Is that factual? Colin's voice grew louder. "You intentionally wrecked my reputation." I stated the facts, responding calmly. "If honesty affects how others see you, perhaps your actions are the real issue, not my willingness to tell the truth." Natalie leaned forward, her posture confrontational. "You're ruining my professional life because of a dispute within our family." "Let's address what truly took place," I replied, grabbing the folder I'd assembled for this situation. "Your intention is to steal nearly 38 years of my efforts through deceit and manipulation." This wasn't an act of panic, it was carefully planned theft. Both of their faces went pale as the extent of my awareness became clear. I brought up our argument about money on Wednesday, my tone deliberate. Thursday morning, tire vandalism sparked a cycle of revenge. On Friday evening, a complicated setup unfolded, featuring alcohol, attorneys, and legal paperwork meant to transfer ownership of my business. My son's resistance collapsed. "You don't understand the stress we've had to deal with." "I know exactly what's going on," I cut in. "You made the choice that taking from my own father was simpler than building your achievements." Natalie Vance orchestrated an advanced con, using her expertise in financial exploitation of the elderly. "We're still family," Natalie argued softly. "You lost that title the moment you schemed to steal from me," I answered. "All the consequences I was experiencing were the direct result of my own actions." I sank down on the sofa, finally recognizing just how utterly defeated I was. Natalie stayed motionless, silently assessing if anything could be salvaged. "No investor will ever place their faith in you again, Colin. Your professional standing in business is destroyed," I went on. "Natalie, the review of your professional conduct is almost certain to ruin your career. These are the inevitable outcomes when you attempt theft and deception." "What about my granddaughter?" Natalie Vance pleaded in distress. "My granddaughter's outlook remains stable. Unlike her parents, she decided to defend our family, rather than take advantage of it. Her opportunities for college and the life ahead of her remain untouched by the repercussions of your actions." I got up, signaling that our discussion was over. "You launched an assault against me by persistently betraying my trust." I countered with unwavering honesty. "For me, justice does not mean seeking vengeance. It means taking responsibility." Without another comment, they departed, heading to their car with the defeated air of those who had risked it all and lost. I remained on my porch, watching their car pull away, likely returning home to confront the wreckage of their lives and shattered alliance. The telephone rang just as their taillights faded from view. My granddaughter's name, Molly Vance, appeared on the screen. "Hi, dear. Grandpa, are you all right? I overheard Mom and Dad talking about some sort of inquiry." "Everything is all right, Molly. Justice has prevailed, and your future is protected." "I love you, Grandpa. I love you too." After 38 years of genuine labor, my efforts are still safeguarded by trustworthy people.